I've been talking to my dad about the decline of the West and how the United States, where I'm from, would be a much less livable place, would be a much less competitive place. And just came across this article in the Washington Post, which asks, is it America's fate to decline and fall? I, for a long time, have thought that it is. I'm going to share what history says about the US and its inevitable, in my opinion, decline and fall. And I'm going to tell you what I've done to protect myself from that and what I think you can do too. So the United States as a country turns 250 years old next year. And yet, according to this article, time may be running out. I've been telling you this for years. I've said that the world's becoming more multipolar and that the United States' share of the pie, not only in terms of its dollar, in terms of its geopolitical influence, all those things are going to wane. And the impact is going to be like a tiger backed into a corner. It's going to get really nasty because they don't like losing their power. In contrast to some of the countries like citizenship by investment countries in the Caribbean that never had any power, I'm a citizen of St. Lucia. They're not going to get angry losing power. That's one of the reasons why they got citizenship in their country. They never had any power really to lose in the first place. And it's a very small country. And so they're very connected to their citizens in a way that the United States is not. The United States has become a Goliath that only wants to maintain power for power's sake. And now, in my opinion, the jig is up. I'm not the only one. Here's what Johan Norberg wrote. He works at the Coe Institute. He's hardly a left-wing guy, KO Institute. It's a very libertarian organization. And so he says, according to a much-discussed TikTok trend of a couple of years ago, men think about the Roman Empire every day. One reason might be that the fall of Rome is a reminder that we too are mortal. No matter how safe, rich, and powerful the United States seems, it might all come tumbling down, as things did that day in 476 when the last Western Roman Empire was deposed. The American founders consciously modeled their new nation and much of its architecture on Athens and Rome. Ever since, Americans have periodically feared that we are living in the decline and fall phase of those empire stories. And what I think stands out is people focus on the United States as an entity in and of itself. Oh, it's still powerful. Oh, it still has the world's biggest economy and all these different things. Look at the everyday American, look at their lifestyle, look at how the quality of living has gotten worse, and then look at the macro factors, the dollar's use as global reserve currency. It's that percentage has shrunk substantially since the beginning of the century. Look at its percentage in global trade, look at all the numbers. They're all moving in the wrong direction for the most part, and that's what you're starting to see trickle down into the lives of everyday Americans. Sure, the country itself is still big and has heft. They can go screw with people and drop bombs on countries and tax their citizens worldwide, but for how much longer? Today, a mix of factors from geopolitical tensions and surging debts to the Trump administration's challenge to free trade and rule of law has brought that fear of being Rome back with force. People are asking whether time is running out for the American experiment and whether Chinese leader Xi Jinping might be right in declaring that the East is rising while the West is declining. Now, here's my take on what I've done to play into that narrative, because I said this year, as I've ever said, that I am going in the global South. I think that's where the future is. I feel more personally free there, substantially more free than I ever felt in the United States. I feel my money is safer there. And I feel that having passports from those countries makes me more able to travel and invest and do all the things that I want to do. And yet I don't know this is entirely East versus West. Yes, there's the high-tax West, Canada, the US, Western Europe, and the UK, Australia, New Zealand. Those places are pretty much all going in the wrong direction. That's the so-called international community you always hear about. And then there's pretty much the rest of the world, and that's not all East. What I've said is I'm going to have residence permits and citizenships all around the world so that whether East or West wins, I'm going to be able to zig or zag or anything in between. And so I think the key here is in a way that your ancestors who moved to the United States or where it is that you live couldn't. You want to have a foot in different camps. You want to have a finger in many different pies so that whatever happens, whatever black swan event comes about, you can move in the direction of personal freedom. You can move your wealth where it belongs. You can, as we say, go where you're treated best. 250 years ago, even 100 years ago, you might have moved to the United States. You know, that's where you rebuilt your life. Even when I was talking to my father about the inevitable decline of the West when I was a teenager, his idea was, well, what if we moved to Chile? What if we moved into Zwind? Those were prescient ideas at the time, but even in the 90s, people didn't really consider you don't have to move your entire life and your family and your fortune to one country. You can distribute them all around the world as we advise you and our clients to do. And so whether the East is rising and the West is declining, what I do know is you're paying incredibly high taxes in the United States and you're getting less and less for it. The social fabric is fractured, probably beyond repair, and the opportunities there are not as great as you will find in up and coming places where people will laugh at you for investing. But I've been investing in those places for years and I've been doing pretty well. And so it's not about East versus West. It's about, can I have a residence permit in Colombia and the UAE and Mauritius and Malaysia? Can I have citizenships that span the world from St. Lucia to Cambodia? And can I have homes in between where I know no matter what happens, I can go there? Not just a black swan event, but to take advantage of economic opportunities. I recently became a citizen of Cambodia, and I'm going to look at buying some property there, and I'm going to look at becoming a bit more involved. I've been investing there for many, many years. But for me, as someone who's already successful, Cambodia has a hell of a lot more potential if you know what you're doing. Over time, that stock market is going to open up and have more stocks. And I think that places like that are going to be the place where you're going to want to go. It's going to be a new America. I'm not saying Cambodia is going to take over the role of the United States, but no country will. There's going to be no one place that has the impact that the US did, but say 100 years ago. Instead, we're seeing people with dozens and dozens of options. And each of those options is going to get their 1% or 2% or 5% share of the pie. We've helped our clients move to over 30 different tax-friendly countries. So it's not just a matter of everyone's going to the US. People are going in all different directions these days. Now, as the article continues, it talks about how few golden ages have lasted as long as that of the United States. But unless Americans adopt a new outlook, it could be over as well. It is hard to disentangle the causes of cultural decline. In 1984, a German historian compiled 210 explanations historians have suggested for Rome's fall, leading from lead poisoning and barbarian invasions to Christianity, moral decline, and gout. After studying dynamic civilizations such as Athens, Rome, Baghdad, Song, China, Renaissance Italy, and the Dutch Republic, this author, the one writing this article, says he can attest there's no one single explanation. Each golden age has its own character and its own downfall, often the familiar horsemen of the apocalypse. War, plagues, and natural disasters play a role. But these calamities appeared many times, and civilizations usually bounced back. Cities can be rebuilt. Knowledge is rarely lost. What proved fatal is something subtler. In the midst of some of these crises, cultures began to lose confidence. Their mentality and intellectual atmosphere shifted. That speaks to what I've told you for years. It's about the culture. How do people think? Are they optimistic about what's happening? And how do they view wealth and success? We saw recently the founder of Revolut, this huge 75 billion disruptive financial company. He moved from the UK, which has high taxes, to Dubai, which has very low taxes. People in Dubai have confidence. Things are happening. People are excited. And if you come with wealth, you're welcomed. In the UK, if you have wealth, you're a punchline for Rachel Ree. She wants to take more of your wealth. That's what's happening in the high tax. It's not, hey, good job. Thanks for building that. Thanks for creating jobs. It's you didn't build that. We did that for you. And we're going to take our share. And if you complain, well, we're going to turn society against you because we want more of your money to pay for the debts that we racked up, to pay for our own version of the wars, the plagues, and the natural disasters which we have mismanaged over the years. And now that there is competition, we don't know how to keep up, and we will put that burden onto you. One ancient Greek historian, the article continues, spoke of two mindsets, that of the Athenians eager to venture out into the world to acquire something new, and that of the Spartans intent on staying home to guard what he already had. I talked about this year about the cultures from the Gujarati in India to the Amani traders, the Portuguese like them, those that went out and built fortunes around the world. Those cultures to this day in many cases are still more open. You can go to Portugal and get a golden visa because they want foreigners to come and invest. They realize on their own they're going to have a hard time growing their economy. Oman, incredibly open sea country. We've showed that to you. It's a place that I love. Some of the kindest people because they had to do business all around the world. Armenia, the Lebanese diaspora. I could go on and on. These are people that went out into the world. They acted as the Athenians. Broadly speaking, the article says the Athenian spirit associated with golden ages when civilizations were open to influences from merchants and migrants, and when they let people experiment with new ideas and innovations, they prospered. This required tolerance of pluralism and surprise, as well as institutions and norms to restrain rulers' arbitrary use of power. Free speech in the West was all but dead. Politicians have taken away a lot of your freedoms and taken away a lot of your power. They're locking people up for all sorts of things. Authoritarianism is more in vogue in the West than people would like to admit, and letting people in, letting trade in. Even the right wing in the United States is now against it. They talk about things like revenge taxes and taxing people who aren't Americans for investing in the United States. That is not Athenian and it's not American, at least up until recently. But now people, as my father and I would talk about nearly 3 decades ago, when I was just a teenager, would become increasingly desperate in countries like the United States. Their quality of life would erode to levels that it's at today and probably will get worse 10 years from now. They do not want to be Athenians, they want to be Spartans. They will, when that happens, close their doors to the rest of the world. They'll impose tariffs. They will cause the US population for the first time in recent memory to actually decline for the first time. Indeed, the article says even modern China offers another example of the importance of such a mentality. Its rise was Athenian in character, beginning with Deng Xiaoping's 1978 reform and opening up when the country embraced entrepreneurship and trade. Xi's recent Spartan crackdown in freedoms and private enterprise threatens to undo those gains. That's why we've seen in recent years Chinese stock market hasn't done so well. Picked back up this year again, but productivity has slowed, debt has soared, confidence has ebbed. It's hard to see the East rising much further that way, he says. But here's the difference. China is not the entire East. I live in Malaysia, have for about 12 years. People there are incredibly open now geopolitically. They much more line with China than with the United States these days. They want you to come and invest your money. They want you to come and get a residence permit through MM2. They're happy to welcome you with open arms because they don't see you as a threat. People who think, oh, I probably can't survive in a Muslim country because, oh, my son is gay or my partner is trans or because I'm black. They found their stereotypes shattered, and they found themselves welcomed into a culture more so than they would ever perhaps feel in their own country in the West, precisely because of the culture. An Athenian spirit in countries where optimism is in vogue, much more so than in the West. The article says, it is difficult to uphold open societies for long. My answer to that is simple. We're not here to change the course of history or change the course of governments. We're here to go where you're treated best. Much like the Mongolians on the steppe, they moved with the herd. That's why you have different residence permits. That's why you have different citizenships. That's why you have your money in different places. I have stocks in China. They did pretty well this year. I'm not all in on China. I'm not living in China. Hey, I opened up a new company. It's in Hong Kong. Why? It's pretty good geopolitical hedge against the Western world. I think that China's Hong Kong stands up better in keeping my tax rate in that company at zero than, let's say, the UAE, for example, that wants to get along with the high tax more than perhaps China does. That hedge can work for me. But you are going to want to be diversified because the society that you're living in right now probably has lost a lot of its openness. You're probably looking for another place to go, or at least a plan B. A lot of our clients come to us saying, hey, if things get worse, I want a place to go. Residence permits, maybe a home, certainly a couple of passports. Things change, countries change, and yet for things to stay the same, everything must change. Among that, where you live, where you hold a passport, where you store your money, where you raise your family, or at least where you have the ability to do so. As I enter a new year after my birth, and as the country of my birth approaches its 250th birthday, it's interesting to look back and see just how much things have changed in the decades that I've been alive. Our clients said the same thing. And yet, it's proven to me why all the millions of dollars that I've spent and invested obtaining these residence permits and citizenships and going to countries all around the world to open bank accounts and open companies, why it has all been worth it, because I don't just want to move from one country to the next frontier. I want to be ready no matter which society is opened or closed, no matter which place is Athenian or Spartan. I will always have a place to go. I don't want to sit around and control politicians. When I was 13 years old, I thought that was the way to go, and now politicians and politics has everybody at each other's throat in a way that you don't see in the non-democratic societies in places like the Gulf or parts of Asia. People are just thriving there. It's interesting to see that if your country is no longer Athenian in its culture, it's time for you to go where you're treated best. If nothing else, a plan B. We help our clients get passports in places they don't even have to move to in many cases by investment through their ancestry and through other methods. We help our clients move overseas and lower their taxes. If you live in the UK right now, I would certainly suggest you consider that before they impose some kind of exit tax and take a big pound of flesh from you on your way out. But no matter where you live in the West, understand your society is increasingly less Athenian and more Spartan, more inward-looking, less outward-looking, less optimistic. That's going to impact everything that you do, and more than just your own optimism. When things get bad, governments will get desperate. They're not want to lose their power. They do not want to give up their grip or their role in the world. And they are going to make it more and more difficult for you to live there. They're going to take more and more of your money. They're going to impose more and more rules and be more and more authoritarian. As Doug Casey once said, better to watch that on your flat screen TV from somewhere far away than be sitting in the soup.